Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This is Hani Ismail from Planning Engineer website. In this lesson, we are going to talk about interesting topic, which is risk management. The risks are uncertain events. So this is the main key of defining a risk. If something I'm sure it will happen or it is already happened, it means it is not a risk anymore. It is an issue. So the risk can be negative or positive. If it is negative, we can keep naming it as a risk. If it is positive, we can call it opportunity. The risk mainly will impact one of the three things or the main core elements we have in our project: time, cost, or quality. We should plan for project risks and prepare risk response plans. As we agreed in project management, always we are a proactive, not a reactive. So ahead of time, we would like to think what could be the risks and prepare some responses to these risks, because failure in risk management will definitely lead to project failure. When I say project failures, I mean the project will be impacted in time or cost or quality. Not necessarily the project will completely fail, but any additional time or delays or any additional cost or any quality issues is a failure. At the beginning of any project, we should think about the risks that might happen. This is called risk identification. Risk identification is searching for and locating resources for risk. We call this risk events. And then we define the probability or the impact of this risk and keep monitoring these risks. We put these data in a table. This table, we call it risk register. For example, here we have some risks. We have three risks, and then we put impact, that what will happen if this risk occurred, what is the impact, and what is the probability of this risk. For example, the design change will delay the project if it happens. The impact is very high. We can put a scale from 1 to 5. So this, if happen, it has a very high impact. The probability, what is the percentage of this risk to be happen? You can put a scale from 1 to 10, 1 to 5, whatever you want. Then you define the risk level by multiplying the impact by the probability. And then we have the risk level. If I'm going to focus on risks here in this table, first I would like to focus on risks with high risk levels. Then I go to the lower risk levels and so on. So this is the point of having risk register, is to keep an eye on all risks. Risk management team can collaborate to define risks and put the relevant score to every risk. And we should in periodic timing to check the risk and identify more risks if they are. And every team member is a risk searcher. Similar to safety, every single person in the project can report a safety issue. Also, every team member in the project can report a risk issue. So here, since we define the risk, we need to make risk assessment. And we have two ways of doing this. Whether to choose to do it in a quantitative way or a qualitative way. So what are the differences between quantitative and qualitative? Quantitative, you will convert everything to numbers, like the example we saw before. You put number of the risk probability, you put number for the risk impact, and you convert everything to numbers. While qualitative, you can make the risk like high, low, medium, and then you keep an eye for the high and the medium risks, for example. So qualitative or quantitative risk analysis or numerical analysis will convert everything to numbers, and then you can have some advanced software like Monte Carlo analysis to make some analysis of your risks. Even you can use Monte Carlo simulation to make some cycles and study the risk impact on your schedule, on your cost, and there are some specialized software of doing this. While the qualitative risk analysis is the process of making the risk, as I told you, if it is high or low or medium. And since we saw how the risk register could be in a quantitative way, let's see how it looks like in a qualitative way. So we can have here the impact and the probability. If I am a project manager in this project, in your opinion, which risks I should focus first to be on top of my priority? Definitely risks with high impact, high probability, so this zone is my concern. Then the next one, I can take this zone where I have maybe medium impact and medium probability. In that case, I can completely ignore this risk which has low impact, low probability. So by doing this, I am giving myself a chance to focus on the most important risks. So risks usually have an impact to one or more of the following: time, cost, reputation, health and safety, environmental, legal, quality. For example, we know that we might have some risks to delay our project or cause a cost overrun, or maybe a risk of a reputation of our company, that we are going to lose our reputation because of some certain risks, like doing a concrete work, something happened related to the safety. Health and safety risk is very high priority also. Also in some oil and gas projects, there will be environmental impact, or maybe illegal, that I close a road and I don't have permissions, so I got a penalty from the authorities because I didn't follow the legal rules. Or the quality, because I'm working very fast, then my quality might be impacted. Let's have some few examples about risk. Delay in material procurement. In that scenario, there is a risk that a procurement of construction materials might be delayed due to supply chain disruption or vendor issues. If we make it a qualitative analysis, so delay in project timeline, the impact will be project delay in project timeline and increase cost due to rush orders or providing alternative material choices. So likelihood high if the project is located in an area like having a logistic challenges or the vendor have a history of delays. And it could be a medium if the project is an unstable area but relies on a single vendor for critical materials. Or the likelihood will be low if there are multiple vendors and I am having a good record for these vendors. Let's take another example of quantitative analysis. If we have, based on the historical data, the market analysis, there is a 30% chance of material procurement delay during the construction period. So if I would like to do it in a quantitative way, how I can do it? I can simply say, okay, if this delay happened, the project can be delayed 15 days. The daily cost of the delay will be 8,000. Then the expected value of the risk will be probability by impact. So here I have probability of 30% and I'll have 15 days of delays, and every day will cost me 8,000. So I multiply all of this one, so the value will be 36,000. What I could do with this 36,000 if I have no options? I can add this one as a contingency in my pricing, and this could be a mitigation for this risk. We are going to discuss the risk responses in a minute, but this is how it is being calculated. So overall mitigation strategies. If I would like to respond to this risk that I'm going to deal with multiple vendors, don't rely on a single vendor, maintain constant communication with supplier to get the potential delays, and also very important to have some buffer time. I don't need to order the material just before I need them without any floats, because if something goes wrong, I don't need my activities to be delayed. If we took the same example of the delay in material procurement in quantitative and qualitative, the qualitative analysis focus on the description, impact and likelihood, while the quantitative analysis assign numerical values to the probability and the impact, and we calculate a value of the risk. These are the main differences. Now we identify the risk, categorize them and analyze them. How we will deal with them? This is what so-called risk response. Dealing with risk can be one of these strategies: avoid, escalate, transfer, mitigate, or accept. Let's talk about each one of these strategies in detail. Avoid: when the project team acts to eliminate the risk in all, so the risk will be avoided completely. We'll take a few examples of this. Then escalate. Escalate is telling someone in a higher position or some department that I have a risk not in my hand. So I escalated the risk to the relevant department or the relevant person. Transfer, when I'm shifting the risk or the ownership of the risk to some other parties. And this could be some confusion here, because when I say transfer, I don't mean to transfer it by its risk. It is still having risk. For example, I am a civil contractor and I have some MEP works in my scope of work. The MEP works, to my expertise, is a risk. If I got a subcontractor and subcontracted the MEP work to him, this is his area of expert. It means it is not a risk for him. So I transferred the risk from myself, because it was a risk for me since I am a civil contractor, to a specialized person. So now this specialized person, the scope of work of MEP, it is not a risk. That is the meaning of transfer. It doesn't mean to transfer the risk with all its consequences to a third party. I didn't do anything like this, but I transferred to a third party who can deal with this risk in a better way than me. Also, mitigate the risk, making taking action to reduce the probability or the impact of, or both of them. The final one, or the final strategy, is to accept. And we have here active and passive. Okay, I know that this risk might happen, so I accept. Okay, but I'll put some contingency money or contingency time for this risk to deal with if it happens. So this is called accept, but it is active. And the other way, and I don't recommend to this one unless you don't have anything to do, is to accept it in a passive way. Passive way mean, okay, I know this risk, but I don't have any action plan if it happens. So eliminate the risk, protect the project from its impact. Escalate when the risk is outside of your scope or your authority. So you need to escalate the risk to the relevant person or department. Transfer is shift the ownership and consequences to a third party who can deal with the risk. Remember this very well. Mitigate is deal with the risk to reduce its probability and or impact. Accept, you are applying a contingency plan or just doing nothing, where it is a passive acceptance. So let's have some scenarios and think about the best response for these scenarios. There is a chance of a bad weather while you have outdoor construction works. You moved this activity to few days later to escape the impact of the rain. In your opinion, this risk, what was your response? This is avoid. You completely avoided the risk because you removed the risk impact and probability. Your company has a project in which there is a lot of not familiar technical part. You have decided to get a subcontractor to do it. What could be this risk response? Definitely it is transfer. You find a team member may leave for a certain duration during the peak of your project. You find another employee with similar qualifications from your organization and informed his boss that you may need him for your project for a period of time. This is a mitigation for the risk. If it happens, you reduce the impact of it. You have an outsourced team working for 1 month on the project activity. The risk of any of them leaving during this month is low. You identified contingency reserve to speed up hiring a replacement immediately if any of them do. So this is acceptance. You know the risk and you told your HR department, for example, we might need a replacement, do ahead of time the interviews and so on. So you accepted the risk, you make a contingency that you already have a speed up process. So risk response, as a response to potential risk, project should have reserve to reserve a backup plan in critical situation. This reserve could be management reserve or contingency reserve. Using the reserve is called mitigation. Let me tell you what are the differences between management reserve and contingency reserves. Contingency reserve is we use when we define the risk. We know the risk. We can allocate a certain amount of money to a certain item and allocate in the budget, and this is under project management control. Like the example we discussed earlier about adding some more money if the material prices increase. While the management reserve, this is to address unknown risks. You might say, okay, I will take 1-2%. I'll put it as a management reserve. This is for unforeseen work that within the scope. It is not allocated in the budget. When I say the budget, if you remember the previous lesson when we was talking about cost control, I don't mean here the selling price. I mean the cost, the actual cost or the planned cost you are going to give to the project manager. So it should be definitely in the selling price, but it is not in the project costs. And this management reserve will be under management control. So the project manager, for example, cannot deal with it. I hope I explained for you in a few minutes the main points of risks. I hope you find this video useful to you. See you in the next one.